Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi tutorials. We are going to have a look at question 3, that's the OOP question of the final of 2022. At the start of the question they will give you a scenario and then they have a few things about where the files are stored and what they are named, and then also they provide you with an example of the interface. I guess that is there so that you double check you had the right question when you're opening the files from Delphi. For question 3.1, we are going to complete the object class. They give you the name there as well. And important is this little table where they describe the attributes to you, also sometimes referred to as fields. And the descriptions here might be important for you. Some years they are and some years they're not. But for example, season, you can see here what to expect to be stored in F season. Once you open the program, you will see on the right-hand side there is the class unit that I can open. You just double click on it and it will open for you. There is where you will enter your exam number. But here are those attributes that they provided to us. If you look at something like the plant code, that could be a number or maybe a string or a combination. So it is important to have a look at your data types here. You can see plant code is a string, number of panels, integer, power per panel, real, and then the season string. They also provided you with some accessor methods. That's the get functions, the plant code, number of panels, and seasons. Take note of them because you would have to make use of them wherever you can in your main program once you get to question 3.2. Let's start with 3.1. Here they typically ask you to write the constructor method in question 3.1.1 unless it's been provided or another method was done first that should be called then in the constructor, which would be question 3.1.2. So you could find the constructor in any one of these two questions. You could have a constructor with or without parameters, but when we look at this question, we see the word receive in there. That means that the constructor has parameters. And now we need to know exactly which parameters it has. You do not want to create more or less parameters than the question requires, else you're going to be very confused once you call your constructor in the main form as to what to send it. So I suggest you number your parameters. There we can see the first one is plant code. Then we have the number of panels. And then we have the power per panel as parameters. Now we have 1, 2, 3 parameters. We do not have to receive values for all our attributes. We have 4 attributes here. From this question, you can see we only need 3. Then it says assign the parameter values to the respective attributes and then assign a default value to summer. You want to complete one method at a time. So do 3.1.1 and I will show you the memo soon. Press pause. We will code below this comment that says code here, and we create our constructor create with round brackets for the parameters. We have the code as a string because the plant code is a string. We have the number of panels there as an integer because number of panels is an integer there, and then same for power, which is real. We are not receiving the season because the question did not ask us to do that. Then you press Ctrl-Shift-C to open the skeleton code, and on the inside there, you now assign the parameters to the respective attributes the question said. Very important is that your attributes go on the left of the assignment statement. Remember this because your attributes start with F which is also called fields. So F field stands for first. First, the fields, and then my parameters thereafter. So that's what I've done for these 3 lines of code. And then the last one, they said that summer needed to be assigned to F season as a default value. So we have to place that in quotes because F season is a string attribute. For your next methods, you need to determine whether they are functions or procedures. The easiest way is to have a look to see if it returns a value or if it has a result, or if they said it was an accessor method. In those 3 cases, it would be a function. But if I look at this sentence here, they do not mention that it is returning any values. And it's not an accessor method. Therefore, it is a procedure. Procedures can have parameters or not, and we have to read our question to determine whether it has parameters or not. Again, we are looking for the word receives, and that indicates that yes, it has a parameter or more. It tells you that it receives a value as a parameter. So there is going to be a parameter there, and it increments the number of panels by the value received. Press pause and try this yourself. The question said it's increasing the number of panels, and the number of panels is an integer. So therefore, my parameter that I receive for this procedure, incnum of panels, is an integer data type. Now you press Ctrl-Shift-C, and this is very simple. You have to add that parameter to the existing number of panels. Number of panels is assigned to the number of panels plus my parameter. If the question said change the number of panels to the number received, your code would look like this, because it's changing. It was 5 and the parameter is 10. Now my answer is 10. If in our question they said add it, so if it was 5, I received 10, the new number of panels would be 15. Let's move on to 3.1.3. It says write code for a mutator. Mutators are always procedures and always public. Your constructor will also always be public. By default, place all your methods as public. Only if the question indicates that it should be private would you put it under private. And here we have that word receives again, which indicates that this mutator, the procedure called setSeason, has a parameter. It says it receives a value as a parameter, and we must set fSeason to this attribute. Now, fSeason, remember, was summer initially, so we would expect this parameter to be a string, and we have to change fSeason to the one received. Press pause, try it yourself. Here I have my procedure called setSeason. Always follow the wording as it is in the question. It receives a parameter as a string because it's going to make a change to fSeason. Then I press Ctrl-Shift-C to get my skeleton code, and this is as simple as that. It is changing the field to the parameter received. This is very similar to your constructor when you are writing a mutator, where our fields go first and our parameters are on the right of the assignment statement. Don't get this wrong. Of our 40 marks for this question paper, we already have 5 plus 4, 9, 12. Very easy marks. And the next one is maybe a little bit more complicated, but just read carefully and you will manage. We first need to determine if this is a function or a procedure, and immediately the word return jumps up at me, and I know this is a function. Before we continue to read the rest of the question, we quickly have to figure out is this function receiving parameters or not? I don't see the word receive in here. Even if I go to the next page, they give us a formula here, but there's nothing being received. Therefore, your function should not have any parameters. And you should be using your fields as though they have values because you would need them. So we also need to determine what the return data type of this function is, calculate capacity. We're obviously going to use numbers, but we have an option between integer and real. There we can see they tell us that depending on the season, there's a certain number of sunlight hours per day. And they give us the formula for the power generation capacity that these sun panels can produce. So there's the formula. We're going to take the number of panels times by the power per panel. Now, if you remember, if we just quickly go back here, the power per panel is real. So the moment we're going to multiply with a real value, that means that this answer that we are returning would be real. The hours per day as it's provided here is integer, but we know this function should return a real result. Oh, they told us that as well. Sometimes they don't, but they did tell us that it is real. So start your function. I'll scroll down just now. Press pause until you're done with this page. And then we can show you the next part. And that is the formula to calculate this generation capacity. Press pause, complete your question. I'll show you the memo soon. Here I have my function, calculate capacity with a real result, no parameters. Control-Shift-C. And here we would need to make use of a nested if statement because it depended on the season, what was that value called? The hours per day, what the sun panel would produce. The moment that you see in a paper a table like this, or maybe it could be listed in bullets, you can be sure to use either a case statement or a nested if statement. We cannot use a case statement in this case, no pun intended, because if season there is a string and case statements can only use integers or real values. So for summer, I start off my result as 10. Remember, you can use your result as though it's a variable. You could also have declared a local variable here for your function to use there. Add if hours if you wanted to, but I just find it quicker to start off my result with the different values. So summer was 10, nested if there, else if the season is autumn, the result is 8, else if it's winter, the result is 6, and then the only one that is left is spring. You could have added the if statement there if it is spring, but you know that's the fourth and final option, so therefore I just put the 8 there to represent my spring there. Then I need to apply this formula. We have this value now, the hours per day, stored as the result. And now we need just to multiply that with the number of panels, which is a field that already got a value from my constructor. Remember, your constructor runs first, so you can assume that if number of panels and if power per panel has values, and you just multiply those with each other, and that's the result it would return. Often, as the last question of question 3.1, we are required to write a two-string method. You can be sure this is a function, but it is also telling you that it is returning a string. So it's a function, always public, always returns a string, does not have parameters. And then they provide you here with an example of what it should look like, or maybe rather the format. All the bits here that is not in the angled brackets, that's just your hard code, so that must be in quotes. Take note of where new lines start, because you would have to use your plus #10 or 13 to create those enters. And then you will see some of the values are now in these angled brackets. Now, all of the ones I'm highlighting now means that it is an attribute from your class or even one of your functions. Press pause and give it a go. The toString should be a place where you can again score easy marks. It's just function toString string data type. We press Ctrl+Shift+C and complete our toString. I recommend that instead of coding this toString in one very long line of code, that you rather build a string like I have done here. Doing it this way serves many different purposes. First of all, it is easy to match this up with, if you have a look at that format there, if it's in one very long line of code, it is not easy to match the format. Then second of all, if by any chance this code in one long line exceeds 255 characters, your code will not run. It will provide you with a syntax error, as a line of code in Delphi may not exceed 255 characters. So that's what I'm doing. The first line is always just the first line there with my label, and then plant code, which is a string, and my #10 to create the enter. There were no empty lines of weird things here. And then let's move over a bit. We have result is result plus. So I'm adding on, I'm building a string. This is the first line. Here I take that line, which is now this part, and I add to that the second part, making use of int string if I need to add integer numbers, and then add float string if I want to display real values. Now this question did not actually tell us how many decimals we should be displaying. An easy way then, if they didn't do this as in this example, you quickly scroll down and you're like, okay, where did they ask me to? Yeah, there's the toString. They asked me to display the toString. And here I can see they say power per panel is 0.532. So that's what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to say display 3 decimals. So you go and have a look in question 3.2 where the toString is asked to be called, and have a look at that output if you are unsure about anything. And then I have my #10 there at the end. I know you guys copy and paste, and then sometimes you add this #10 there too. Don't do that. Take note that there's no #10 at the end. There's usually a #10 with the first lines, and then the last one doesn't have one. The first line does not have result as result plus. First line just has a result. From there on, I build my toString. Now's a good time to save and run your program. You will not get any output, but at least you can sort out any syntax errors that's in your class unit. Question 3.2 will now ask you to complete the main form. They will tell you what the variable was that was declared for you, in this case obj plant, and your job is to go to the main form. There is where I put, this is the top of the main form, where you put your examination number, and then you scroll down until you see where they've declared it. Sometimes they do it here, sometimes they do it there, sometimes they do it there, but they should declare it for you and take note of how it has been declared. In question 3.2.1, we most often have the instantiation of the object. I cannot guarantee you that 100%, but most of the times it would be in the first question of 3.2. The button here even is called instantiate the object, which really just means you're going to call your constructor create. But before we can do that, we need to first do a few other things. So here's the question. They say extract the plant code. And when they use the word extract, that just means store input from the user. and they give you the names of the objects, the number of panels, and then also the power from the this edit box. This needs to be done first before you can instantiate the object, which means we're going to call our constructor create. And then they want you to call your toString method. Press pause and give it a go. It is best that you download these papers from education.gov.za, but here is the example of input and output, just in case you have not done so already. Test your program to see if it works. Your first job is just to get input from the user from the objects. That's grade 10 work. Hopefully you can all do that. There is the code, the integer. Remember your spin editor has a dot value, and then the power is coming from an edit, so we need to string to float that. Then we need to instantiate. So I've deleted my code. I actually don't like typing while you guys are watching. I find it a bit boring to watch people type, but I want you to show you this method. Go to where the object was declared for you. You select all of that, you copy it, because you guys often get this code wrong. So this is the method to help you remember. You then change that assignment, the colon, add an assignment statement, an equal sign to make an assignment statement. And then after this end part, you type .create. Once you've done that and opened the brackets and you have no errors above this line of code, you're going to get some hints as to what does the constructor create require. I can see it needs the code, so then I see, okay, I need to enter the code and then a number which is integer. Fortunately, we have string, integer, real, so we can't get confused. We know spin edits always produce integer values. So I have I number, not that one. And then the last one is a real value for the power, and that is my real value or power. And voila, I can do this without getting it wrong. Without this single line of code, nothing will work in this 40-mark question. It might run without crashing, but you're not going to get any output. So it is important to get this line here that we just did, that is instantiating the object. And this would be the last time that you use the object type. So the last time that you use that bit there. From here on, you will always use obj plant, the object declared. What you need to keep in mind is your arguments, that's the local variables here that I use in the brackets, must match my parameters. Now my parameters are those that I declared here in my constructor. They must match not in names, but in not number. How many are there? There were 3 declared here. There should be 3 in here. Order. So my parameters were in code, number, well, that was the number of panels, and then power. So yeah, I must have code, the number of panels, and power. And then finally, data type. If you have a look here, we have string, integer, real. So in here, we need string, integer, and real. Our next job was to display the toString. The toString is a function, so functions are always called as part of other statements, either in an assignment statement or in this case in the rich edit, could be in a label, maybe it was just one line. ToStrings, of course, give us string output, so any string object or even writing the string to a text file maybe could be asked here too. Important is that whenever you now call any other function, that you always precede it with obj, plant, dot, and then the name of the toString. So now it is time for you to test your program. And if they don't provide the default input, which is the first set of example of input and output, I suggest that you go and type it in your object inspector, else you're going to type it multiple times. So there we have the input. We click on instantiate, and I should see exactly the same that I have on the left. I should see in my on the right where my toString was displayed. Remember, the season was set as summer. We haven't entered summer, but the season in my constructor was set as summer. So therefore, I'm seeing summer here now until I click on the other buttons to change it. I would like to show you what happens if you put your toString under private instead of public, because this actually often happens. You guys, I don't know why, but sometimes you guys just want to add it to private. If I now click on that, you see there I'm seeing the type T solar panel plant, and then everyone's very confused as to what is happening. All you have to do is take your function heading, you don't have to redo the whole thing, place it under private, under public, move it from private to public, and it will work. Here we have button 3.2.2 where we're going to increase the panels, and there's our little scenario that the need for more panels arises. Again, they're telling us there to extract the value, so we're storing it from the spin edit. Don't get confused between the first spin edit and the second one. And then they even tell us call incnum panels, the method that we wrote, with the value from the spin edit as an argument. They're giving us quite a lot of information in this paper, which they won't necessarily do. They now even give us some further hints here that we have to display the plant code and the number of panels after the increase in the rich edit. So they've been very kind to us. Remember, for the plant code and the number of panels, right at the beginning I said take note of the accessor methods that they provide. They gave you accessor methods for this, and there would be specific marks allocated for using them. So press pause and try question 3.2.2. I'll show you the example of output just now. So there is the output. It should say 18 after the code, obviously, of the first one. Remember the first one we had 15, and now 3 is added to it, and now the number of panels must be 18. If it didn't work, fix your code before you continue to watch the memo. Here I am in question 3.2. I declared a local integer because I'm only using it in this button. Getting input from the spin edit. Remember the .value property is integer, so we don't need to string to int. And I'm asked to call incnum of panels. If you remember, incnum panels was a procedure. And I told you earlier that if we call a procedure, we must make sure that it stands on its own line of code, like we use IncICount. I'm sure you're all familiar with IncICount. IncICount isn't part of an assignment statement, cannot be used in an if statement, and that's the way we call procedures. Again, I said that you have to use your object plant every time you call a method, so that is for procedures and for functions. So object plant dot inc number of panels, we needed to give it a number, an integer number, and that would be that integer input that I got from the user. Then they say display the plant code. We have get plant code. That was the provided functions here at the top. It was a string, so very easy to just say obj plant dot get plant code. And then we also needed to display the number of panels after it was updated. So get num of panels, which is an integer. You would have to, let's set enter here so you can see, into string. And inside of the into string, I have my object name and get number of panels, which will return an integer for me. Now let's run the code and let's make the mistakes that you guys make. In other questions, the buttons run independently. So once you're done with question 1, you would often just continue with the next button and run it. We know our code is correct because I showed you the memo, Now I'm getting an access violation. The reason for this is that in this button here, my constructor was called. So I was instantiating the object there. To run any of these other buttons, I always have to click on this one first. Then only am I able to click on any other button. And that's the same for all of these. These guys aren't dependent on that one. This one isn't dependent on that one, this one on that one, but they all depend on this button to run first to instantiate my object. In this third button on the main form, we have been asked to update the season. So you have written the set season method, also a procedure. You have to get input from the user from the combo box, and then you have to also display your toString in the rich edit. I'm sure you're able to do this one. Press pause, try it yourself, and I will show you the example of output just now. Here is the example of output when winter was selected, and we have this output. Now, sometimes people get a little confused as to how did they click to get to these answers. I told you that the update button was not dependent on the previous button, so let's just quickly. So this button is not dependent on that one. However, the screenshot that they made was actually after button 1, the first button and the second button was selected, because I can see 18 there. However, if you type in 18 and then select winter, you should still get the right output. And yeah, in the third button, we need to get input from the season. I always recommend, even for a combo box, to use item square bracket combo box.item index. You can, with a combo box, use the combo box.text as well. But it's important to know this code, because for radio groups and list boxes, they don't have a .text, and you have to use this code. So while you're practicing, even for a combo box, use this code so that you can remember it. We then had to call set season, and remember, set season is a procedure with a string parameter. So we would call obj.setSeason, and inside the brackets we will send it that string variable holding the name of the season. It is a procedure, so it is not called as part of another statement. And then we actually can just copy out this code here from our first question and then paste it down here. And that is our output. So we can quickly test it. All we're actually looking for is that, so I first click on this one and I change summer to winter, and that the summer, once I click this button, has changed to winter. It doesn't affect anything else here. If I click on increase panels, I will see that, but if I click now on autumn, I should see autumn. And in this last button of question 3.2, we are going to use the function calculate capacity to display the maximum generation of capacity per day in, obviously, the season, because that determines how many hours we are going to use in that formula. So press pause and give it a bash. I hope you saw that the season here was displayed, and you were not supposed to use the input from the user to display that. Remember that the third accessor method that was provided for us was that get season method. So you should have used that. Wherever you can use your methods, do use them, because you will not get the mark if there was one and you didn't use it. So here we go, very simple. We have the long label they gave us, and we had to use their provided get season method. Let's just jump there so you can see what it does. It just returns the season. So it is a function with a string data type. Let's just hit enter here so you can see better. So I have obj_plant.getSeason to display the winter in the example of output. And then we have just the value. But take note, after the value, kilowatt was there at the back. And there could easily be a mark to add that. So I've used floater string F, because if I have a look here, I can see 3 decimals displayed. So I'm going to also display 3 decimals. And inside of floater string F, I'm calling the function calculate capacity, and remember to precede it with obj_plant. So obj_plant dot calculate capacity with a kilowatt there at the end. Now it's time to test. And we saw it's winter, so clearly we've instantiated the object. I wonder if they showed us, but they didn't really tell us if it was 18 panels or 15, which is not great. Let's change it to winter. So let's ignore that bit there. We update the season, and now we want to calculate, and we're getting the wrong answer. So my guess is that they increased the panels first, they updated the season, and now when I have a look, yep, that is the correct output. So in this paper, we actually had to assume that we would update all of the questions, that we would run all of them, even though they can work independently. You just always have to instantiate the object. So a bit of a tricky one in terms of running the program. That's the end of question 3 for the final of 2022. I hope you practiced with me. If you didn't, go and give it a try. And if you need more information about OOP, that would be in my Dandelion Delphi book 3. Keep coding and keep asking questions. Hope to see you soon.